I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there.
John waits until John waits until the year 100. That means he's 100 years old. And the book of Acts says that John was illiterate in the year 35. He was illiterate. So this man who's illiterate at 35, he suddenly, when he's 100, he writes this gospel talking about the Logos, and his Greek is like amazing, and it doesn't make any sense. Why would he wait so long to write something down? First, he probably didn't write it.
Dr. Lacona.
Ancient biographies. The Gospels are a subset of Greco-Roman biography. Richard Burge has an excellent book on it. It's called What Are the Gospels? It's been very influential within the world of New Testament scholarship. And ancient biographers did vary in the amount of liberties that they would take when writing biographies. They certainly took liberties at times. And that's why you do have some of the discrepancies, like the day Jesus was crucified. I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there. They certainly took liberties at times. And that's why you do have some of the discrepancies, like the day Jesus was crucified. I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there. I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there. I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there.
So, to sum up, it is now widely agreed among New Testament scholars that Jesus himself, the historical individual, did not think of himself as divine and did not teach anything like the later doctrine of the Incarnation. The New Testament sayings in which Jesus seems to claim divinity, such as "He who has seen me has seen the Father," "I and the Father are one," "I am the way, the truth and the life," "No one comes to the Father but by me," are all in the Gospel of John, and it is widely agreed they cannot be responsibly attributed to the historical Jesus, but are words put into his mouth by a later Christian writer around the end of the 1st century, some 70 or so years after Jesus' life.
I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there.
Did Jesus actually die on the cross? Well, the Gospel according to John says that a spear thrust was put in his side, and one might think that that surely killed him. But historians generally believe today that that spear thrust is not historical. John has introduced that into the story. It is not mentioned in the synoptics, and John has introduced that for his own theological reasons. Partly, some say, to make sure that everyone would know that Jesus actually died because he was speared in the side. Well, take away the spear thrust, which is not historical. What is the fact then about the story? What actually killed Jesus? There's nothing. Crucifixion doesn't actually kill a person by itself. What kills the person is exhaustion and shock that results from a prolonged hanging on the cross, sometimes for a couple of days. But according to the Gospel record, Jesus was there only for a few hours. This is why when Joseph of Arimathea requested his body for a private burial, Pilate, under whose auspices Jesus was said to have been crucified, wondered if Jesus could have died so soon. He inquired of the centurion, who confirmed, but the centurion was by this time a Christian and had no reason to want to see Jesus dead.
I think that John probably altered the day in order for to make a theological point there.
Now, we go apart from these three Gospels to John's Gospel, and we notice that now Jesus, suddenly, the whole thing is rewritten. So whereas in fact in Mark's Gospel you will find, for example, that Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, indicating that he has a will different from that of the Father, but nevertheless he submits his will. In John's Gospel, we're told that Jesus wouldn't pray like that. In John 13, when Jesus enters Jerusalem, or when he approaches Jerusalem, he says, "Now my soul is troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it is for this very reason that I came to this hour." So this is a very different presentation in John's Gospel. John doesn't have the Garden of Gethsemane prayer in which Jesus says, "Save me from this hour." In John, Jesus wouldn't pray like that. In the other Gospels, Judas Iscariot is necessary for surrendering Jesus to the authorities. But in John's Gospel, John it has Jesus handing himself over to the authorities. They do not dare arrest him, just his voice blows them over. Right from the very beginning in the Gospel according to John, John the Baptist declares that Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So we have here a developing Christology over time. Why did the early Christians think that Jesus is God? It's because largely John's Gospel and this development over time. Thank you very much.